Chapter 2. The King's Loneliest Hour. There was a room in Buckingham Palace that did not appear on any public tour, brochure, or glossy documentary. It was not the throne room or the picture gallery or the ballroom with its glittering chandeliers and history of state banquets. It was smaller than all of those, tucked low in the western wing, with a ceiling a fraction too low for grandeur and shelves a fraction too crowded for display. It was the King's study. Not the official one, the one the cameras occasionally visited for Christmas broadcasts and carefully staged photographs, with its polished mahogany desk and well-behaved lamps. This was the other study, the real one, where the varnish had been rubbed dull by elbows, and the books were allowed to lean tiredly against one another, like old comrades. Alistair IV had discovered it as a boy, hiding from some forgotten tutor. Over time, he had claimed it silently, filling it with his own detritus. Drafts of speeches, annotated policy briefs, private letters from the public written in 100 different inks and handwritings. There were files on long-closed mines and small-town hospitals and forgotten railway stations, the paper ghosts of things he had tried to keep alive and mostly failed. Now, in the hour after his son's televised renunciation, he sat alone in that room, the door closed, the world politely kept outside. No cameras, no staff, no queen. Not yet. The fire in the small grate had been lit at some point, though he could not remember hearing the match. The flames licked at the coal with a restrained English intensity, more glow than blaze, a polite warmth. Shadows of the books wore long faces on the walls. On his desk lay three objects. The red dispatch box, that eternal rectangle of state, sat at one corner. It looked slightly ridiculous here, an officious intruder at a kitchen table. Beside it was a photograph in a simple silver frame. Theodore at 7, gap-toothed in a miniature suit, trying very hard to look serious and failing. And between them, like something that might have fallen from the pocket of an ancestor, was the old copy of the coronation oath. He had kept it here, folded, since the day he swore it. Alistair leaned back in the battered leather chair and closed his eyes. For a few seconds, he simply listened to his own breathing. It sounded louder than usual, as though the room had grown too small to contain it. He had always known, theoretically, that this moment could come. For years there had been op-eds and think pieces about the role of the monarchy, about modernity and relevance and the cost of invisible crowns. Sometimes the words had been politely academic. Sometimes they had been venomous. He had read more of them than his advisors realized. He had underlined some. But in every version of the story, the erosion was gradual, a slow retreat. Not this, not his only child, standing in front of a cheap chair and a plain wall, saying the word renouncing as calmly as one might say, resigning from a cricket club. An image flashed across his mind, unbidden. Himself as an old man, shaking hands in care homes, unveiling plaques, opening charity galas, smiling for photographs next to politicians who considered him a useful relic, while tourists queued outside to file past his portrait. And then, once he was gone, the institution quietly shuddered, outlived by its own souvenirs. The last true monarch, he thought. The phrase had been lurking in some shadowed corner of his mind for years, like a mouse behind the skirting board. Today, it stepped out, bold. He opened his eyes. On the opposite wall, above a low bookcase, hung a portrait of his grandfather. The painter had tried very hard to make the old man look kind. It was not entirely convincing. The eyes were flint, the jaw granite. A man who believed the monarchy to be ordained and unquestionable, as permanent as weather. "I suppose you would have had him dragged back," Alistair murmured to the canvas. "Duty first, happiness nowhere." His voice sounded odd in the small room, as if it belonged to someone else. He cleared his throat. "I have been dutiful," he went on, more to himself now. "I have done the handshakes and the bows. I have kept my opinions out of the papers and my temper out of the microphones. I have smiled at things I considered foolish and remained silent when I wanted to shout." The portrait did not reply. Portraits rarely did, but he had always found them good listeners. "I did all of this so that there would be something to hand over," he said. "So that when my knees finally gave up and my lungs finally protested, I could place the crown on the head of someone who believed in the story enough to continue it. He looked down at the red dispatch box as if it might contain a spare heir, tucked between briefing notes on fisheries and foreign trade. It did not. The realization came not as a dramatic blow, but as a slow, spreading quiet at the center of his chest. There is no one. On paper, there were cousins, of course. Second sons of minor branches, distant relatives whose genealogy charts he had nodded through without ever quite memorizing. Men, and they were mostly men, who had spent their lives in comfortable anonymity, surfacing occasionally in the society pages, never expecting to be anything more than a royal footnote. He pictured one of them being told that their country now expected them to live inside a glass box. He imagined the look in their eyes, at the moment they realized their life was no longer their own. For an instant, he superimposed Theodore's face over them all. The carefully schooled smile, the tightness around the mouth, the weight of making everyone else's expectations your weather. He did not love his cousins enough to inflict that on them, nor did he think they believed in the institution in any way that would matter when the storms came. He reached, slowly, for the folded paper at the center of the desk. His fingers remembered the feel of it. He unfolded the coronation oath and spread it flat. The promises stared up at him. To govern the peoples of the United Kingdom according to their laws and customs. To cause law and justice, in mercy, to be executed in all judgments. To maintain the laws of God and the true profession of the gospel. To maintain in the United Kingdom the Protestant Reformed religion, and amp.c and amp.c. He had taken the words seriously, even as some of the specifics had become quaint, the world shifting underneath the phrasing. As a young man, he had believed that his job was to keep the myth alive long enough for the next generation to inherit something recognizable. Stability, continuity, the famous line of the Windsor blood, like a thread binding eras together. Now, in this cramped study with its scuffed skirting boards and too thin curtains, he found himself asking a question he had never before dared formulate. What if the myth was not the blood at all? He ran a finger along the first line again. Govern the peoples. Not endure for them. Not exist like a waxwork for them. Govern, in the oldest sense of the word, guide, represent, hold accountable, embody, and be embodied by. What if the line that mattered was not between monarch and heir, but between monarch and people? What if the idea of inheritance by birth alone was not ancient wisdom but simply habit, fossilized over time? He sat back. The leather creaked. The thought that came next arrived intact, as if it had been waiting for this precise moment to reveal itself fully. It did not creep in. It stepped. If there is to be a future, he thought, it cannot be another accident of DNA. He almost laughed at the audacity of it, and at the same time, felt a tremor run through him. There it was, the decision that shocked even him. Not yet the details. His mind had not leapt, as Amelia's would, to adoption or to the specific number of 32, but the core, radical decision that the monarchy, if it continued, could no longer be a private family arrangement with public consequences. He would not drag a cousin into this. He would not wait for some miracle grandchild to be conceived in a rush of duty and genetics. He would not pretend that the line of succession was a sacred river when he could feel how near it was to drying up. If this thing was to live, it would have to be rooted differently, chosen differently. For a few long seconds, the idea sat in the room like an extra person. Chosen. The word had a dangerous electricity to it. Chosen by whom? How? Parliament? The people? Some council of elders? The tabloids, God forbid. He could already hear the howls from certain corners. Constitutional lawyers would have fits. Traditionalists would speak of betrayal in tones reserved for invaders and recessions. The Prime Minister would sputter about precedent and stability. Lady Walthrop would probably resign on the spot and go give interviews from a tasteful armchair to whichever broadcaster offered the softest cushion. Alistair's lips twitched at the thought. "You always said I must leave it as I found it," he murmured to his grandfather's portrait. "But perhaps that is the one promise I shall be allowed to break." Behind him, the fire cracked softly, a tiny burst of applause, or protest, or simply physics. He imagined, for a disorienting instant, an entirely different scene. Not a single boy standing alone in front of a cheap chair renouncing a destiny, but a group of young faces, diverse in every imaginable way, standing not behind him, but beside him. People whose lives had already intersected with the harsher edges of Britain. Children who knew what it was to be overlooked, or underestimated, or written off in small, lazy phrases. What would it mean, he wondered, for the crown to grow out of that? He shook his head once, as if that might dislodge the vision. It lingered. There was a light tap at the door. Then another, more deliberate. "Come," Alistair said. Queen Amelia entered without waiting for him to rise. She had tied her hair back, hastily, and there were faint pillow creases on one side of her face, but her eyes were utterly awake. She took in the scene with a single glance. The open oath, the red box, the silver-framed photograph of their son, the way Alistair's shoulders were set. "James told me you wanted a few minutes," she said. It has been slightly more than that. He glanced at the clock on the mantelpiece. He had lost 40 minutes. The loneliest hour of his reign had slipped past without him noticing its full length. "I have been thinking," he said. "I suspected as much," Amelia replied. She crossed the room and sat in the chair opposite his, mirroring his posture. They had been married long enough to know that posture mattered as much as words. "We cannot simply find another heir," Alistair said. "Not like choosing another tie when one is stained. I will not have some poor man lifted from comfortable obscurity and nailed to the front of the ship because the original figurehead jumped." Amelia studied him. Her gaze was not soft, but it was kind. "Then what will you do?" she asked. He hesitated. Saying it aloud would make it real, move it from the safety of private speculation into the dangerous realm of intention. "I think," he said slowly, "that if this institution is to have any moral right to continue past me, it cannot rest solely on lineage. We cannot go on pretending that blood alone sanctifies authority. If there is to be a future monarch after me, they must in some meaningful way be chosen." He felt the air change with the word again. Amelia's eyebrows lifted, the smallest reaction, but noticeable. She leaned back, the chair protesting slightly. "Chosen," she repeated. "By whom?" "That," he admitted, "I do not yet know. But I know this much. I will not sign off on another coronation that looks like a museum piece reenacted. Not after what we have just seen. Not after he broke off." The photograph of Theodore sat between them, the smiling boy oblivious to the speech he would one day give. Amelia reached out and turned the frame gently, so that the boy was looking slightly away, granting them privacy. Alistair exhaled. "It may be," he said quietly, "that the line ends with me." Amelia regarded him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm. "Or," she said, "it may be that the line changes shape." He looked up. She had that look again. The one that meant a wild thought had already taken root in her and was now rapidly branching into possibility. But whatever she was about to propose, it would land on soil that had been turned over in this room, in this loneliest hour, by a man who had just, without quite realizing it, broken faith with centuries of inherited inevitability. He had decided that there would be no more heirs by default. The rest of it, he knew, would flow from that. "Tell me," he said to his wife, the Queen, the quiet revolutionary, "what shape do you see?" And as the fire crackled, and the first reporters began, outside, to rehearse their phrases about crisis and chaos, Amelia of Wessex opened her mouth and began, very gently, to remake a monarchy.